Today is January 20th, 2015. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library. We're interviewing Robert Wilson, a Vietnam-era veteran, as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project and in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Robert, for being here today and for participating in our project.
You're welcome, and I'm glad to be here.
Robert, where and when were you born?
I was born in Bayshore, New York, Long Island, because there was no room at Huntington Hospital. I'm a lifelong resident of Huntington.
And when was that?
April 8th, 1949.
Who were your parents and what did they do?
My father, Robert J. Wilson, was chief in the Navy, did 24 years, got out right after World War II. And my mom worked at Republic Aviation in Farmingdale, Long Island, while he was away as a bookkeeper. Not exactly Rosita Riveter, but almost.
Good. And who were your siblings? What names, and did they serve in the military?
I have one sibling, Donna, and no, she didn't serve in the military.
Now, what were you doing before you entered the service?
I was in high school. I joined as soon as I got out of high school.
And in which branch of the military did you serve?
Navy. Had to join the Navy because of my father.
Ah.
No.
Now, did you enlist or were you drafted?
No, I enlisted. That was before they even had a draft, when they were thinking about having a draft. I said, they're not going to get me in the Army.
So you enlisted, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Now, why did you choose that branch again? It was because of your dad?
Because my dad did 24 years, and he was a leading chief when he retired, which is something like in the Army or the Marines, it'd be a command sergeant major, like the senior enlisted man. So I grew up with a lot of military discipline and stuff, which was good for me, I guess.
Was he you said he was in World War II?
Yeah.
Served?
Well, he spent a lot of that in Brazil.
Oh.
In aviation, but they sunk a U-boat.
Oh, wow.
And he was in China, and he fought in Nicaragua in the Banana Wars and stuff.
Wow.
So.
Always in the Navy.
Yeah.
Now, what happened when you left for training camp and during your early days of training?
I went the day before Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow. And what year?
To boot camp, 67. Mm-hmm. And my mom was having a fit. And, I had Thanksgiving dinner on a metal tray. Oh. And they kept us up all night when we got there. And then the guys that had been there for weeks were making fun of us because we didn't have haircuts or uniforms yet.
How come? Because of the holiday? Or?
Yeah. Because when we got there in the middle of the night, and anyway, that was no fun. And it was cold.
What part of the country was this?
Great Lakes, Illinois.
Oh.
And yes, it got to be like 17 below, I think. That was no fun.
Wow. Were you had like barracks? You were inside?
Yeah.
I mean, not tents?
Yeah, it was a barracks.
Uh-huh. And you recall your instructors? What were they like?
Brutal, but they were supposed to.
Okay.
And that was in the good old days when they could curse at you and insult you and all that stuff.
And they did?
Yeah. And sometimes they'd make you had to wash your own laundry by hand in the laundry room.
By hand?
Yeah. And sometimes if they were in a bad mood, or he was in a bad mood, he'd make you hang him outside on a drying rack. And then he'd get everybody up at 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, all your clothes are frozen, you better come in and get up and go wash them again.
Jeez. And you did? You had to?
Yeah.
At 2 in the morning you watched them again?
Yeah. Well, maybe 1 in the morning.
Wow.
I remember that a couple times, when they said you got to hang it outside and it was below zero, you knew you were in trouble.
I wonder why they did that.
Just
discipline.
Just to discipline, to break your spirit. They got to break everyone down to make you into a different person.
Wow.
Part of the machine.
Did you receive any specialized training, and if so, what was it?
No.
No.
They wanted to send me to officer candidate school because I did good on all those tests, and I said, I don't want to be an officer.
Really?
Well, I was 18, so I thought that was cool.
To say no?
To say no, yeah. So probably a mistake.
So you just learned regular military, how to shoot, or what did you learn?
A little bit of everything. There wasn't too much on the rifle range. A lot of exercise. A lot of there was book learning about ships and stuff.
About the ship you were going to be on?
Yeah, or ships in general. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How they operated and so forth.
Yeah, and had to go to firefighting school for a few days, and school for being in gas attacks and all that, and putting on gas masks and.
Yeah, but so the fire was in case there was a fire on ship?
Yeah, you can't call the fire department if you're 1,000 miles at sea.
Wow.
So, but yeah, no, it was just general boot camp. Yeah.
How long did that last, training?
About 3 months.
How did you adapt to the military life, like the food and the social life, barracks?
Pretty good.
How did you
I
feel
kinda
about being
liked it.
there? You liked it?
Yeah. I had planned on staying, make it a career, 20 years or so.
Oh,
And that ended up not working out. But, I decided to get out after 4. But, yeah, no, I adapted pretty well.
so after 4 you had the option to re-up? Or you didn't?
Yeah, well, I didn't want to.
You didn't want to, but you could have.
I could have, yeah.
Now, where exactly were you stationed? Where did you serve?
I was on 2 different destroyers, old World War II ones. The Miles C. Fox, 829, and the USS Leary, 879. And first one was out of Newport, and the other one was out of Norfolk, Norfolk, Virginia. And we, on the first one I did a cruise, we did 9 or 10 months in the Mediterranean. And then we went home for a month or so, and then we did what they called then a Red Sea cruise, and the Suez Canal was closed then, so we had to go all the way around Africa, around the Horn, to get back up there, and we spent a lot of time based out of Bahrain in the Persian Gulf.
Now,
It was hot.
it was hot? Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes you were sailing for months at a time until you reached...
Yeah, a month or so, and then we'd pull into some, godforsaken little country.
Oh, just to refuel and
Back
things?
then, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And see what kind of supplies you could get. Probably the only one in this room that's been to Senegal.
Yeah, that's for sure. Senegal. So, when you served on the ship, were you able to get off the ship and visit the country you were stationed near?
Sometimes. Depends on if you're only going to be there for a few hours, then no. But if you're going to be there for a few days, they always had what they called port and starboard liberty. Like you were in the port or the starboard section. So we only have time in this port for port to get off. So starboard people had to stay on board. But next time it would be starboard. And it was all what they called Cinderella liberty, which means you always had to be back by midnight.
Oh, I see. Oh,
There
wow.
was no overnight stuff.
How many people do you think were on the ships?
It was good. It was small. It was only like 200. So everybody knew everybody.
Really?
And the captain knew who you were, and you didn't have to. It wasn't terribly military because it was two cramped quarters and everything.
Oh,
I mean, you didn't have to. We never marched around or anything, and very rarely dressed up unless there was some kind of visiting dignitary in some port or something.
did you each have your own room, bed in a room? Or,
What are you kidding?
I mean, a cot. Or what?
No,
How was the
they
sleeping
called them a
arrangement?
rack. We had a compartment that was probably 20 by 30, and there was like 50, 60 guys in it. And the racks, they call them, were 3 high.
You mean
and-
3 beds on
Yeah,
stacked up?
yeah. So you had to step on the other 2 beds if you were in the top rack. And they were right under the pipes and everything because all the pipes were exposed. And the top wasn't that great because then the cockroaches would fall on you. So,
Wow.
but
Which one were you in? Do you remember? Did it change? I mean, did you
When-
alternate?
when I had no seniority, I was on top.
Oh,
But then when I got to be a little more important, when I'd been in for a few years, then when there was a good open bunk, I said, that one's mine. So, and they were loose. They were canvas strung on aluminum frame.
yeah. No mattress.
Yeah, no, there was a little skinny mattress, like an inch or so. But you'd loosen the thing so it would sink you, so you'd sink in a little. Because when it was rough out on these little destroyers, which are only like 390 feet long, they would. You had 3 bunk straps too. You'd strap yourself in at night.
In case it was rocky and
Yeah,
so you
in
didn't.
case you were rocking, and it was a solid floor. Everything was pretty much steel and linoleum. So sometimes you'd have to go to bed and then tie yourself down to go to bed.
Was it often kind of wobbly on the open seas? I would
Yes, because I was on the deck force, the boatswain, the guys that worked outside.
Oh.
And all that, and for some reason, it seemed to be like that on all the cans. They lived up front and the bow, towards the bow and the pointy end, which was the part that goes up and down.
That's where your sleeping was?
Yeah, down below, so it'd be up, but
Did you get sick? Or you get used to it, or what?
you get used to it. But I was good at getting sick for a while,
How long did it take till you didn't feel it
a
anymore?
day or so.
Oh, that's all?
Yeah. But yeah, no, you'd be pretty sick for a while.
Yeah.
And if you got sick, you had to clean it up yourself. Nobody was going to clean it up for you either.
Wow. Were they able to treat you or give you something against getting sick?
No, they just yell at you, call you names.
No, so were you near the front lines at all of those Vietnam, you said?
Yeah, no, I was the other way, went to the Mediterranean and the Middle East and stuff. That in 1970, we were called out. I think we were in Athens in port, and the shore patrol came around and rounded everybody up. So we got to go, there's a problem. And that was the Black September
Oh, yeah.
in Jordan when they wiped out, they wiped out the Black September terrorists, their army and all that. I think it was Arafat was part of that then. But they had all the fleets off the coast of Israel for almost 30 days. It was like the Americans, the British, and the French.
And you were there too?
Aircraft carriers, yeah. And we were at like battle stations, like 12 hours on and 12 hours off.
Were shots fired? I mean, from the ships?
No.
No.
stuff going on land, but they just kept, but you had to be there, and it was hot.
I bet.
And I was on a gun crew. I was a pointer in one of the big gun turrets.
Oh.
And I had these huge set of, eyes, binoculars
Okay.
that were built in, and look into them. And I looked at an Egyptian MiG fighter pilot right in the eye. He kept flying right over us and grinning. But then you never knew if he was going to open up,
I mean, onto the ships?
Yeah.
Wow.
Or onto one of the, I mean, he would have been dead too, because there was so many American ships around there, or
Watching.
French or British ship.
Wow. You were there, how long was it?
That was for about 30 days. They gave us all a medal for that, but,
What medal?
the Meritorious Unit Commendation. But didn't do much except sit there and eat C rations or K rations. Well, that was before they even had the MREs.
Huh.
Got to sit there and eat little stuff out of a can.
How was it?
Awful.
Really?
Yeah.
You didn't have to cook anything. You couldn't cook.
No,
anything.
you couldn't cook anything. You just had to sit there. Yeah. So
Wow.
that
Yeah, but it was
was-
pretty dangerous. I mean, it had potential to.
it had potential, yeah, but nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing happened.
Thank
yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
What kind of friendships and camaraderie did you form while serving, and with whom?
Seemed to be tight with a few people. And the first one was with my friend Lizard.
Is that the real name?
No, his name was Lazan, so of course everybody called him Lizard. And he's the one that made me get my first tattoo,
Oh,
because he had to cover up the name of a girl on his arm that dumped him. So, but then he got thrown out of the Navy. He got into drugs and all that. And then I had another friend, Lyle Haney, on the other ship. He was a really good guy. And Eddie Straczynski, who more or less saved my life one night
oh, in what way?
on a refueling station. When you're the underway replenishment from another ship, we were working on the outside lines, or I'm sorry, on the forward line.
You mean
And-
refueling from another ship?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and it was rough out, and it was always from a big one to a little one.
Okay, sorry about that. It was a little battery malfunction, so we're back to being on ship with Robert Wilson.
Okay, I was talking about being on a forward refueling station in the North Atlantic one night, and it was cold and wet, and there was a lot of big waves coming up on deck, and everybody on the crew out there on the refueling had life jackets, and somehow this wave picked me up, and I was out over the rail for a few seconds.
Hanging on?
No, there was nothing. Just all of a sudden I was out in the ocean, but my buddy Straczynski reached out and grabbed the back of my life jacket and pulled me back against the railings,
Wow. Oh,
which
that's
were just
scary.
wires, And then I climbed back on board. But I could have been gone
Easily.
in the North Atlantic at night.
Wow.
So
How could he see you? Oh, you just were.
he was just next to me because we were working together, and then, it was up.
Wow, that
Because
must
on
have
the
been scary.
little ship like that, it got washed down a lot. I mean, you'd walk outside and you'd think everything was okay, and then all of a sudden there'd be a wave.
Wow.
And sometimes they'd put it on over the squawk box, the PA system, like nobody go outside,
Oh. Because it was too dangerous with the waves.
Yeah,
I see.
because it was a little ship, but
Wow. I guess you owed him.
blew water over the bridge. I mean, there'd be waves 30, 40 feet high sometimes.
Wow.
Monsoons and hurricanes. I mean, I saw a few of those,
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So were you able to keep in touch with those comrades?
Strangely
Or?
enough, no,
No.
never did.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
Back then, they didn't have any internet or any of that stuff, and it was just writing letters back and forth, which sometimes, especially when we were over in the Middle East, it'd take a month or two to get there.
Well, especially if you're on a ship, how do you mail a letter?
Well, the next time you get to port, there was somebody who was the designated mail clerk, would take the stuff somewhere and then they'd ship it back to the States. And everybody had an FPO, Fleet Post Office, instead of it'd be the USS whatever, FPO 123 or whatever. And then it would catch up to you eventually.
Well, if your family would send you letters, how did you get that?
Same way. When it caught up to you, it caught up to you.
What if it was, does it ever happen that it's sent to one FPO, but you've already left that one and gone to the next?
It didn't happen to me, no, but I could imagine it could have happened. Yeah.
So then the next boat would just get it and.
Yeah, I would assume they'd forward it, yeah.
Huh.
I wrote a letter to my best friend from high school, and it turned out I wrote the letter about a month after he got killed in Nam.
Oh, wow.
He was in the Army, but I hadn't heard that yet either.
Right, right.
So
his family got your letter, probably.
well, it went to the Army, and then I think they returned it to me.
Oh.
And then I somehow got a hold of my mother, and so. And the long distance phone, even if you got to do a port, I mean, you were in some strange country and something, and trying to get a telephone line back to the United States, and well, I'm 12 hours time difference too, it's
Tough.
so. No, it was a lot more primitive than today.
Sure. But now, when you were on ship going back, I forgot to ask you, were you injured ever during your tour?
Cut myself a couple times because I carried a knife. Part of my job was I was on the deck force. I was a bosun mate. It was all ropes and knives, ropes and knots and things, and you had to carry a knife. And I had one that folded up on me. It was a cheap one, and I cut my fingers right to the bone, and my thumb was hanging off, sort of. But,
They were able to treat you on
Yeah.
board.
yeah, I didn't have it was too small to have a doctor,
Really?
Yeah.
What if someone got really sick?
Then they'd have to take you somewhere. And I got what they call a FID. We were splicing mooring lines, putting, the big eyes that go over when you tie up a ship. They don't come from the factory like that. You got to make them. And you got to take a mallet and a pointy wooden thing and hammer all the stuff through. And
What is the purpose of those? What's their function?
the mooring will tie the ships to the dock, and the thing came through and hit me in the eyeball, and it was bleeding like crazy, and they almost had to turn the ship around.
How did they treat
But
this?
they got some doctor on the radio from somewhere, and they said, no, let him rest for a day or so and see if he can see then,
And that was
And,
okay?
yeah, and I was okay, so. And it got me out of a couple days of work.
Wow. You mean the big rope is what
Yeah.
hit you
Well,
in the eye?
no, the rope didn't, what they called a FID was a pointy piece of wood you used to separate the different twine. Like the rope is not one piece, like it's all nylon now. It was like 3 different threads. So to separate them, because they were so tight, you had to wedge that thing in and hammer it. So
Wow.
that was fun.
Oh, must have been pretty painful.
Yeah. And it would take all day to make one mooring line sometimes.
How did they piece it, how did you piece them together? Pieces of rope?
When you opened it up like that, you'd take the end and weave it through, and then you'd make another section and open it up and then weave it all through until you got a great big loop.
Wow. Did they teach you how to do that in your training, basic training?
No,
How did you know how to do that?
on-the-job training.
Wow.
So,
Now, what did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
drink.
No, really?
No, and sightsee. Been all through the Vatican, Rome, been up to Pompeii and stuff.
What other countries were you able to see?
The Parthenon and Athens. We used to get tired of having to go back to Athens again. Oh no, we're going to Athens again, you know. That, and went on a 3-day camera safari in Africa and Kenya.
Really?
Yeah.
That was off duty, on your own?
Yeah. Well, that was like you could take some leave. They arranged that. But yeah, saw a lot of weird things.
Huh.
I'm probably also the only guy in this room that's been to Madagascar.
Yeah.
So
Wow. How was that?
it was interesting.
Was that only like recreational, or were you?
Well, the ship came in there. They were showing the flag. That was before there was a fleet for the Indian Ocean.
Oh.
There'd be like 2 destroyers at a time, and they were never together. So you'd spend 6 or 8 months just traveling all over and pulling into a port for a few days, and yeah.
Did you go? I guess you stopped at friendly ports just for.
Yeah.
Or. I mean.
Like you couldn't go to, I've seen it, like Cape Town, South Africa, going around the Horn. You couldn't, or we couldn't stop there because it was still apartheid.
Oh.
And there was, a bunch of black sailors on board, and they weren't going to put up with anything. And it was, I guess, the government policy, no, we don't go there, even though it's a big fancy city, and it would have been convenient. But,
That's interesting.
but I've seen it.
You've seen it from afar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, your service lasted through what year?
September of '71.
So actually, the war was still going on.
Yeah.
How did you return home? How did you get home?
Well, the ship came back to Norfolk,
Oh,
and I got, they called it separated. I got separated there, and you got like whatever your back pay was. And I took a bus home,
from Norfolk to, it
Virginia, back to Long Island.
was a long ride at that time.
Yeah. 7 or 8 hours, I think it was, because they always seemed to be locals. They'd stop. Then we're going to stop in Washington D.C. and we're going to stop in, well, probably not Baltimore, but somewhere in Jersey, and then we'll finally get to the Port Authority.
Did anyone you know meet you there, or took
No,
a train
just-
back home, or?
Yeah, and I got it to walked from the Port Authority to Penn Station. I took the train to Huntington, and I just walked home.
Wow.
So I was living with my parents then, or I was right after that, and I just, walked in the door like with my sea bag.
Did they expect you? They knew when you were going to
They
be
knew I
home?
was getting out, but they didn't know exactly when, and I figured I'd surprise them.
Big surprise.
So, yeah.
How were you received by family and the community?
The family was real excited, and my mom called, all the relatives and everything, and they really liked it. And I had my father and 6 uncles were in World War II, so I had, big mill, and everybody came over to the house in the next day or two, and So that was pretty good.
Nice, nice.
And the community, I didn't know anybody anymore because all of my circle and friends went in the service.
Oh,
So I had nobody to hang around with, really.
how did you readjust to civilian life? What did you do after you came home?
As little as possible for a while. And then my mom and dad both worked for the school district by then. And I had put in a job application there. And my mom was on the executive board of the union, and my father was an organizer. And they said, well, why don't you try the school district? And I said, I put in an app a month ago. And then they said, well, did you tell them who you were? And I go, no. And I was working on Monday.
Wow. As what? Doing what?
As a school custodian. And I did that all through. I went to college after that.
Whereabouts?
At SUNY Old Westbury. And then I went to law school after that, New York Law in Manhattan. And
NYU? Or?
no, New York Law School.
Oh.
It's 100-something years old, but it's not NYU. I was on the old GI Bill. I forget what year that expired, and now you got to contribute and all that. But back then, I got basically 7 years of college for nothing.
Nice.
So the government was good to me. You know, I gave them 4 years, and they didn't kill me.
Right.
So, and then they, gave me all of that. And
College plus law school.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
And I get my health care from the VA now. So, I got no regrets.
Good.
Except maybe I should have stayed.
Yeah.
Did 20-something.
Did you practice law then? I mean, after law school, what happened?
Yeah, I practiced for a while. And then I got with the title insurance business, with doing real estate closings and stuff. It was legalistic. It wasn't, I wasn't in the courtroom going, Your Honor, please. I did that for a while, and I wasn't that good at it. I wasn't comfortable. So, but anyway, the government was good to me.
Now, did you remain in contact with any fellow veterans at all?
No. People not necessarily that I served with, but like after I was home for a little while, I got a house with 2 other guys, and we were all veterans, a couple years older than all the other people out there being idiots and stuff. And in college, too, and law school, like the veterans hung out because it's kind of a little
Family.
Yeah.
At least you had a lot in common.
Yeah.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations, and which ones?
Belong to the VFW and the American Legion. So.
Now, I meant to ask, how long did you practice law, let's say, the real estate angle, or how, did you do anything after that? Or?
Between the law and all that, I'm more or less still doing that, which is since the late 80s, so
Wow.
doing some of that, yeah.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life, do you think?
I don't know, that taught me a sense of responsibility and self-reliance, which I guess may be the same thing.
Not exactly.
But I was kind of a lost soul till I went in the service.
Really? Were you liked it? Were you afraid at any time, or?
I was afraid a few times. I mean, physically afraid. But that was probably good for me too. I mean, I wasn't crawling through the jungle or anything. But on the tin can was the destroyers. The Navy wanted to keeps trying to call them the Greyhound of the seas,
Okay.
because they're small, there's no armor, and they scoot. But all everybody who served on them called them was tin cans,
Why?
because they bounced around and they weren't very heavy, and all that, and the living was kind of tough. And I read a thing in the Newsday some years ago that during the Vietnam era, the lowest reenlistment rate of any part of any service was the tin cans.
Oh, really?
So that means like more grunts that were in the jungle were signing up again than people that were on tin cans.
Do you think that's why you didn't want to re-up, or?
Maybe that had part of it. You know, I never had any of that fancy shore duty where you had your own apartment, and No, I've met guys since then that did 4 years in the Navy and never saw salt water.
Wow.
So,
What do you think are some life lessons you learned from the military service?
like I said, with the personal responsibility and and taking orders, like when you have a job and you have a boss, you can disagree and you got to do it. I mean, it's not all about me,
Right.
I guess would be a good short answer.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Oh, I'm not in favor of war, but we need a strong military to deter, and I could go on for half an hour about that, but we need a strong military, and again, it's good to form young people into, adult men and women, and I think it's a good way to be. It's not just, like, I remember when they started the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and somebody said, well, I didn't join the service to be in a war. Well, yes, you did.
Wow. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
Wow. Yeah, it was a worthwhile experience. It was a life-changing experience, and I quite possibly remember more about that than being married and going to school and my whole work experience. And,
Wow.
you know,
Why do you think that is? Because it was such a different way of life, or?
yes, it was such a different way of life, and totally. I mean, it's unimaginable unless you're there. It was hard, but it was.
hard.
That's why it's all 18 and 20-year-olds doing it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Was there anything you did that you regretted while you were in the service?
Not saving money.
Really?
No, basically no.
And lastly, is there anything you feel we haven't discussed or should be added to the interview?
I threw potatoes at the Russians once.
No kidding. Why? Where were you?
In the Mediterranean, the Russian Navy would always play chicken
Oh.
with our ships, and especially when they were refueling or something. And one day we were steaming along, and this Russian destroyer came pretty close, and they were stored outside in like aerated bins. They called it the spud locker, where they kept hundreds of pounds of potato. So somebody got the idea, and the Russians were getting close, so a bunch of us were back there, and we just started throwing potatoes at the Russians.
Was it close enough to hit their
No,
boats? Oh.
almost. Maybe if you were a major leaguer outfielder, you could have hit it, but nobody did. And then some officer came by, and he was laughing. And he says, "Come on, guys, you can't be doing that." But he was laughing,
What was their intent to get so close?
They're just playing chicken, just harassing.
Oh, but hopefully it wouldn't have.
They're still doing that, mostly with airplanes now.
Oh, wow.
Still harassing. But yeah, I threw potatoes at the Russians.
It's
So.
funny. It's funny. It's a good story. Okay, well, thank you so much, Robert. We really appreciate all your memories and your service for sure. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for having me, Mrs. Sussman.